So when one is actually have a cleansed mind, and that's called getting rid of the anarthas, kama, krodha, mada, matsarya, varyavaya. Anarthas like lust, anger, greed, illusion, envy, etc. And where do the anarthas come from? They come from sinful activities. They come from pious activities. That may be a shock to you. Because pious activities means that you're in the mode of goodness, and Krishna in the Gita says happiness in the mode of goodness is actually entangling in the world. It actually makes you attached to a sense of happiness, material happiness. So it comes from sinful, pious, and of course offenses against the devotees, offenses against the holy name, offenses against the Dham, any sort of offenses. And then anarthas also come from the byproducts of bhakti. What does that mean? That means that when you perform devotional service, you begin to actually think of yourself as a great devotee. Not only do you think of yourself as a great devotee, but others think of you as a great devotee. Oh, you chant so nice, you play the bass guitar so nicely, you know. Oh, you're my hero. So, he's like that. So, and you get an artist. Doesn't mean you should give up the bass guitar, but you should understand you're not the doer. You know, Krishna's empowering you. You're borrowing, as the Upanishad says, Ishvashamidam sarvam atkincha jakjam jagat tena chakjena bunjata madgudha kashasvidanam. That everything is owned and controlled by the Lord, even your talents. And Krishna's giving you your talents. And at a certain point, he'll take it away. Just like Arjuna. After Krishna had left the planet, his whole talent of utilizing the Gandiva bow was lost. When Krishna's wives were being escorted by Arjuna after the drowning of Dwarka, these cowherd infidels attacked Krishna's wives to kidnap. Actually, they were incarnations or expansions of Krishna. But anyway, and Arjuna tried to use his Gandiva bow. It just didn't work anymore. It's like going to your car and it just doesn't start. So his bow wouldn't start. And he couldn't remember any of the mantras or anything like that. So everything is, you borrow everything from God. So when you don't remember that, then you take credit for your own activities, your own success, your own talents. You know, I'm a good bass player. But anyway, who knows? Krishna can take it away. And you won't know the difference between an A string and an E string. What's that? How do you play that? Krishna takes it away. So, anyway, so these are the sources of anarthas, and these anarthas have to be eradicated. And so we eradicate them by the process of bhakti and also being conscious and controlling our mind and senses. So anyway, so that's how you cleanse the heart. And there should not be anything dirty remaining. So anyway, so here's the story. That Lord Chaitanya requested that the superintendent of the temple give him the ingredients so he could clean the temple. And basically the devotees were thinking, this is not a fit service for you to clean the temple. Because, you know, you're a sannyasi, you're God. You know, why should you clean the temple if you're God? You got plenty of people who do things for you. Well, the point is that Krishna actually does clean our hearts. Isn't it? That is mentioned. Hridyantaksto yabadrani vidunoti saritsatam. Isn't it? Shranatan swakata Krishna punya shavana kirtanam. So Krishna in the heart. Hridyantaksto. Krishna residing in the heart. He cleanses the heart. We don't have the ability, like Prabhupada said, especially for those of us who are not born in pious families. Prabhupada said our hearts sometimes can be compared to pieces of coal. Why did Prabhupada use that example? Because the more you wash a piece of coal, guess what? Does it get clean? Has anyone ever seen a clean piece of coal? No, you just get your hands dirty at the same time. So Prabhupada said that's the problem. So therefore we need Krishna. So anyway, the superintendent of the temple supplied Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with everything, brooms, and the Lord was so pleased that his devotees were joining him. He smeared sandalwood pulp on the foreheads and all over the bodies of the devotees. Pretty wonderful, isn't it? Because it was a festival. Actually, it's joyful to clean the temple. It's not something that's just like, oh my God, we better hire a janitor to do it. When I joined the movement, the first thing they had me do was clean the toilets. And I'd never done that my whole life. I'd never washed my own clothes. I never did anything. That's what mothers are for. Isn't it? Is it? I mean, why did Krishna invent women and mothers except to clean clothes and clean the pots and do everything like that? So, anyway, so Lord Chaitanya gave each devotee a broom, and they went to cleanse the Gundeja temple, and they cleaned not only the floor of the temple, which you generally clean, but the walls, the ceiling, the Singhasana. Singhasana means the lion throne, or the lion seat. Devotees sometimes pronounce that word wrong. They go, Shringasana. You ever heard devotees say that? So in the West, sometimes they say, the Shringasana. It's not the Shringasana. It's a Singhasana. Singha, like the Singadev. Sometimes they pronounce Lord Nrsimha wrong. They're Lord Nrsimha. It's Lord Nrsimha. Singha. That means throne. Like Singapore. You know what Singapore? Singapore is a place. That means the Lion City. Sanskrit name. Because like if you go to Thailand, the names of the streets are Rama 1 and Rama 2, isn't it? And the king is called Rama. Pretty good. So, anyway, so they begin to clean, and also Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally cleans the Singhasana with his own cloth and clean the area between the temple and the kirtan hall. And there were hundreds of devotees doing this. And he instructed all the devotees, as they were doing this, to chant the holy name. Not just like be morose, oh, cleaning. It was like Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And it's described the Lord's body was covered with dust from doing this, and he was using his own tears to clean, because he was crying in ecstasy. Then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gathered all the straw, dust, grains of sand, and he threw it in one place, and all the devotees did the same thing with their particular area. And Lord Chaitanya said, I can tell how much each of you work by how big a pile of dust you have outside. And of course, Lord Chaitanya's pile was far greater than everybody else's pile. And anyway, then they took the finer dust, grains of sand and everything like that. At that second time, and Lord Chaitanya was very happy to see that. And while the temple was being swept, 100 men took water pots, waiting till Lord Chaitanya told them to throw it. They threw all the water, and there were another 100 water pots, and they kept filling the pots again and again and again. And they cleans the ceiling with the water, the floor with the water. Of course, this is all marble, or stone. Actually, it's stone in the Jagannath temple. So it's like you can't do that here. It would destroy the whole temple if you started throwing water. And, short out all the lights and everything like that. It'd be an absolute disaster, so don't try it. So, anyway, so much water was there, it became like a river floating out of the temple. But sometimes the water fell on the lotus feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and devotees actually begged for that water. And some of them secretly took the water, but Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't like it very much. Then the Lord mopped all the rooms with his own clothes, and the temple was described as purified, cool, and pleasing, just as the Lord's own mind had appeared. So that's how the temple should be. The atmosphere should be very, very pure. Of course, not only externally, but because the holy names are being chanted continually, it keeps the temple pure. As soon as if you want to make the temple impure, then you just start talking prajalpa inside the temple, like politics or something like that. And then the sound vibration affects of course, sound is transmitted through the ether. So ether is a subtle material element. So it actually affects everything, it affects the consciousness and everything of people inside the temple or inside any building, depending on how people speak. Sound vibration is the most important thing. Just like in the Bible, it says in the beginning was the Word. And we also say in the beginning was the Word. Like Om, of course, there was also Tapa that was mentioned to Lord Brahma. So, anyway, so in this way, people were chanting Hare Krishna and cleansing the temple. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, one point, actually there's an interesting story. One devotee drank Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's foot-bathing water, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu got very angry with him and threw him out. And then he let him back in. So, this is from Madhya-lila, 12th chapter, text 115. That's the end of course, that's the end of that chapter. So, go back to the Ratha. So that's the cleansing of the Gundicha temple. So it's an important day to cleanse the temple and cleanse our hearts so that Krishna will sit in our hearts. So, go back to the process. So that's part of the process of Rath Yatra. So then it comes time for Lord Jagannath to go to the Gundicha temple. So the first thing that happens when Lord Jagannath goes to the Gundicha temple, he takes permission from Lakshmi. We mentioned before that he just tells Lakshmi he's going for a walk. And Lord Jagannath is very attracted to Padakiya Bhav. So there's two things, Swakiya and Padakiya. So Swakiya means his wives, married relationship. Padakiya means not transcendental, it's transcendental, but it means someone who's not his wife. Outside, someone's outside. What we would call, in terms of the regulated principles, illicit sex life. But as we have mentioned, everyone is actually married to Krishna. So there's no question of illicit, because everyone, we mentioned this the other day, everyone of the gopis got married to Krishna when Krishna expanded himself as the calves and cowherd boys during that period of time. So that was okay. So anyway, so Krishna is thinking, why is he so attracted to Padakiya rather than Swakiya? The reason is the Padakiya relationship is far more spicy than Swakiya. Just like if any of you from India ever watched a Bollywood film, usually it doesn't have some happy family sitting there, Usually it's very romantic. People are sneaking around. People are lying. People are kidnapped. There's all sorts of interesting things in Bollywood films, isn't it? You've ever seen a Bollywood film? Yeah, he used to watch all the time. But now he has Swakiya. Now he's married. So anyway, so Krishna wants to enjoy the tasty relationship, the rasas, the indirect rasas, like humor and anger, bewilderment, all these different indirect rasas. So Krishna, he wants to have it, and this is much more interesting for Krishna. So then Krishna has this excuse, and then the first thing is the Pandu Vijaya. We're talking about the Rath Yatra now, that's where Lord Jagannath takes permission. Then, after that, the next process is called Balagandi Viprasana, where Lord Jagannath takes food before he goes on his excursion. And he exits the temple being carried on silken ropes by these Sabaras. And there's a whole story about that, which we don't have time to tell. But they bring these silken ropes every year, and then they bounce Lord Jagannath from one cotton pad called a tuli to another cotton pad. He's so heavy, and they're rocking back and forth. Actually, in the Rath Yatra in Jagannath Puri, right before the Rath Yatra, they have like performers come out, like jugglers throwing things in the air. Anyone's been to Rath? You've been to Rath Yatra, right? So you've seen the jugglers throwing things in the air. Of course, it's so hot that people die from the heat during Rath Yatra. So that's another point. So then they bring Lord Jagannath out, Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra out. They mount their carts, and they proceed on the process to the Gundicha temple. And while Lord Jagannath is being brought out, you have a king, his name is Prataparudra, who's actually sweeping, Jai, Gorntaki Jai, who's sweeping the road to prepare Lord Jagannath's path. And of course, when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw this, then he gave up his reluctance to meet with Prataparudra. So later on, during this whole process, he meets with Prataparudra Maharaj, because Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that Prataparudra Maharaj may be a great devotee, but because he's a king, that spoils everything. It's like one drop of poison and nectar. So someone may be a great devotee. So then, of course, when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was present, the cart stopped at a particular juncture, and Lord Chaitanya was pushing the cart with his head to get it to move, even though the king and all of his elephants and horses couldn't get the cart to move. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would exchange different loving relationships with Lord Jagannath as he was in the cart. And Lord Chaitanya, of course, is Krishna, but he's in the mood of Radharani. So Krishna in the mood of Radharani, experiencing separation from Krishna. In other words, he's experiencing separation from himself. That's pretty cool, isn't it? The ultimate selfie. The Krishna is feeling, I want to meet with Krishna. And he's in the mood of, why is he in the mood of Radharani? Because he wants to experience the love she has for him. He wants to see himself from her perspective. He wants to experience the happiness that Srimati Radharani experiences. Because Srimati Radharani experiences more happiness than Krishna. He wants to see himself from the devotee's perspective. In other words, it's more blessed to be a devotee than to be God. That's a higher position. Because you can control, that's nectar devotion mentioned this, that is the only means of controlling Krishna. So, anyway, so this exchange goes on. Of course, Lord Jagannath is Krishna, and he's experiencing separation from Radharani. And then the gopis are pulling the cart. Of course, this whole Rath Yatra signifies the meeting of Krishna with the residents of Vrindavan in Kurukshetra during an eclipse. And the residents were trying to get Krishna back to Vrindavan. So this is pulling of the cart. The pulling of the ropes is actually bringing Krishna back to Vrindavan and assisting the gopis. So one wants to assist the gopis become very elevated in Krishna consciousness, then you just pull the cart. You don't have to be real fancy about it. Just pull the cart. Just like we were just recently in New York during the Rath Yatra, and there were literally tens of thousands of people fighting to pull the cart. Most amazing. It was the biggest Rath Yatra I've seen in the Western world. The whole street, I couldn't even get close to pull the rope. I touched the rope, and some lady hit me, get me out of the way. Because she wanted, she said, who was sannyasi? She said, that's all right, here's Lord Jagannath. Anyways, it was intense. It was actually a lot of people. It was fun. So, in other words, you're assisting the gopis. So then, they arrive at the Gundicha temple, which has been cleansed, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates assume a different mood once they get to Vrindavan or Gundicha. When they're in Jagannath Puri, it's more, there's a lot of awe and reverence there. But when they get to Gundicha, they're swimming in the Indradunya lake, splashing each other, fighting like that in the water. Like Lord Nityananda fighting Advaita Acharya. He didn't like that. She didn't like that, sorry. And splashing water in Advaita Acharya's face, and Advaita Acharya getting upset and basically saying bad things about Lord Nityananda. So they're acting like kids. Advaita Acharya at one point becomes like Ananta Shesh, and Lord Chaitanya floats on him. Pretty amazing stuff. And also they sported in the other lake called the Narendra Sarovara. So that's why we say Gundicha is like Vrindavan. It signifies Vrindavan. Sundarachala. You understand? It's Vrindavan. So Lord Chaitanya becomes like a little kid. So they do this for about 5 days. Then Lakshmi sort of discovers her husband hasn't come back. And she doesn't have a mobile phone. Texting him, where are you? So, in order to punish him or try to get him back, there's this festival called the Herapanchami Lakshmi Vijaya Festival. And during this festival, Lakshmi sort of attacks Lakshmi and her associates. She attacks the associates of Lord Jagannath. Lakshmi goes on a palanquin, and she arrests the associates of Lord Jagannath. During Lord Chaitanya's time, Lord Chaitanya's associates played both parts. The associates of Lord Jagannath and the associates of Lakshmi. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was laughing to see this whole thing. And he remarked something very interesting. And ladies, please don't get upset with this. He said there's 3 types of jealous women. Sober, restless, and mixed. So the sober means they don't say anything. They just tolerate. Restless means they talk back. Mixed means they're just a little sarcastic. I know you love me. Something like that. So that's quite interesting. And then on the 9th day, they return. And anyway, 9th day they return, and they return to Jagannath Puri, Nilachala. There's Nilachala, Sundarachala. You understand? Both places like that. So there's a return Ratha on the 9th day. So then as far as the esoteric meaning of Rath Yatra, not esoteric, but the story behind Rath Yatra, that was told by my godbrother, Gaur Govinda Maharaj. It's a very interesting story. He says, once upon a time, Krsna was in Dwarka, and of course Baladev and Subhadra also in Dwarka. And Rohini was asked by the wives of Krishna to tell about the pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan, because the wives really wanted to hear. And Rohini was in both places. Balaram was known as Rohini Nandana. So they approached Rohini, and she said, well, I'll tell you about the pastimes in Vrindavan. However, I don't want Krishna or Balaram hearing about these things, because they're going to want to go back to Vrindavan. So they posted a guard at the door, and that guard happened to be Subhadra, who was Yogamaya. Actually, Subhadra is very interesting. Her expansion is Mahamaya, but she's Yogamaya. There's 16 varieties of Yogamaya. I mean, it's really gets a little technical there. So, and of course in Vrindavan, Yogamaya is also manifest as Purnamasi. Does anyone know who Purnamasi's grandson is? What? No, Purnamasi's grandson. You don't know? Madhumangal. Madhumangal. Who is Purnamasi's son? Here's a test for all of you. No one knows. Sandapani Muni. So Sandapani Muni had a son also named Manu Mangal, apart from the son that was actually brought back from the dead by Krishna and Balaram. And he sent his son to Vrindavan along with his mother. This is Krishna's pastimes. Nice, isn't it? So Rohini was telling the story about Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. Krishna's wives were listening, they were ecstatic. And Subhadra, who was told not to listen, put her ear to the door. Because whenever you were told not to listen, you said, this is a secret. You're not supposed to hear. Then you bug the person. That means you put a bug in their room or something. And then you listen. And so she was listening. She became so ecstatic that her arms shrunk up into her body. Because when you have a spiritual body, you're not confined or limited to the expressions that material bodies have. Like if I become ecstatic, I just go like this. My arms don't shrink. They don't, like Lord Chaitanya's arms, they would extend. It's pretty much the same thing. I mean, the best I can do is smile. And that's it. But when Lord Chaitanya became ecstatic, his arms, just really extended tremendously. And sometimes they went back in his body like a tortoise. Amazing. And so Subhadra, she looked like Lady Subhadra that we have on the altar, the deity of Subhadra. And then Balaram walks by, and he thinks, what's happening with my sister? And he listens, and similar thing happens to him. Not exactly the same thing, but similar. And then Krishna walks by, the same thing happens to him. So you have these three deities. So that's really the explanation. And of course, exoterically, you have the story about the unfinished deity, King Indradunya, right? King Indradunya brought the wood in, and he hired the sculptor. Some people say the sculptor was Vishwakarma, other people say it was Krishna himself. Anyway, there's two versions of the story. And so he was told, don't disturb for something like 21 days. And and if you disturb me, I'm going to not finish my task. So the sculptor every day was going, and one day, it was like the 14th day, they couldn't hear anything. And so the king was thinking, I don't want to disturb the sculptor. But his wife said, you got to check, maybe something's happened. And so he went in, and there were these half-finished deities. And he got so upset that he was going to fast until he died, because he thought he had committed a great offense. And then Krishna revealed to him in a dream that he wanted to be worshipped in that particular fashion. And then, at the end of this whole story, this is of course the famous story of King Indradunya. At the end of the story, King Indradunya asked for benedictions. And in one of the benedictions he asked for is that he would have no children. That's interesting. And why would he ask for that benediction? Because he understood that if he had children, the children would claim the temple of Jagannath as theirs. And you actually see this in Vrindavan with many of the Goswamis. And they're not actually Goswamis like sannyasis. That it becomes like the family property after a while. And what they did, for example, anyone who's been to Vrindavan has gone to Loi Bazaar. Loi Bazaar is where you buy your saris and your dhotis and everything. And so Loi Bazaar was basically owned by the Radha Damodar, the whole Radha Damodar temple. And later on, they sold off a lot of that property, most of that property, to people for family maintenance or something like that, sometimes for the deities. So, therefore, the king didn't want to have any descendants, so no one would claim the temple, claim the money from the temple as his own. As we talked about yesterday in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's disappearance day, there was one king who was actually taking all the money from the hundi. Hundi is the donation box. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur fined him so much and the king tried to kill Bhakti Vinod Thakur with it. Sacrifice, but he was unable to. So anyway, so that was the benediction. Another benediction the king asked for was that Lord Jagannath's hands would always be wet. Why was that? Anyone have an idea why he asked for that benediction? So Lord Jagannath would be eating all day long. He wanted Lord Jagannath to be fed all day long. So if you go to the temple, they're actually bringing food in to Lord Jagannath all day long. And then King Nindra Jr. also asked that the temple would only be closed for 2 or 3 hours a day, so people can get darshan of Lord Jagannath. So anyway, this is the story of Lord Jagannath and his Rath Yatra, and especially the Gundicha Marjana. And so we should keep our hearts clean, not be like Kunjara Sochara, like an elephant bathing. That means, elephant bathing means, elephant takes a bath and he throws dirt on himself. I know it has a purpose, but the example is used to illustrate the point that we should always be careful about contamination in this world. Because this material world is actually a place of danger. Like Prabhupada said, you Western boys and girls, and also you Indian boys and girls, are not enough afraid of Maya. You think you can play with Maya. And then what happens when you play with her? You're finished. Because she's much more powerful than you. Not more powerful than Krishna. Daivayesha gunamaye mama maya durachya mama ivaye prapajante. So she's not more powerful than Krishna, but she's certainly more powerful than you. Actually, the word Durga means to move with great difficulty, like a jailer, Prabhupada said. So anyway, so this is the story, Gundicha Marjana. Any questions or comments? Yes?
So is the Rath Yatra the journey return from Gundicha to the temple?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, now the Rath Yatra we're doing is going to Gundicha. And that's the main Rath Yatra. The Rath Yatra we do in the Western world is going, unless we do 2 Rath, the return Rath too. We could do both. But, the original Rath Yatra in ISKCON was done in San Francisco. The devotees didn't have a cart then. They rented or borrowed a flatbed truck. Everyone knows what a flatbed truck is? It's like a truck with just a flat section on the back. And they put Lord Jagannath in a little canopy on the back and drove through the streets of San Francisco. And the devotees were so enthusiastic for Lord Jagannath. I'll tell you how Lord Jagannath came to the Western world. There was one of my god sisters, Malati. One time she went into an import shop and she saw a big bucket of little tiny figures. And anyway, she stole one. Anyway, little figure. And she brought it to Prabhupada, and she said, Prabhupada, what's this? And Prabhupada immediately offered his obeisances and said, Lord Jagannath has come. And Prabhupada took that as Krishna's indication, because Prabhupada was Lord Jagannath's devotee. He was always looking at the train schedules when he was young to see how he could get to Jagannath Puri. Finally, when he got a little older, he went to Jagannath Puri. There's a whole story about that. He went to Jagannath Puri, and one of his relatives were there, and the relative tried to feed him fish. And Prabhupada said, what is this? He said, meat. Prabhupada never ate meat his whole life. But Jagannath Puri, they do eat fish, actually. They call fish the fruit of the sea. Like if you're along the Ganges, you say Ganga Fall. That means the fruit of the Ganges. It's crazy. Somehow they don't understand the fish is alive. So Prabhupada went there, and so anyway, so getting back to the Jagannath Puri, New Jagannath Puri, which is San Francisco. Prabhupada saw it and he said, Lord Jagannath has come, so we have to make a temple for him. So then he instructed this devotee, Shyam Sundara, who knew how to carve Jagannath deities. And so he was carving the deities, but the devotees then were so new in Krishna consciousness that while he was carving the deities, he was smoking a cigarette. Not only smoking a cigarette, it's a famous story. He put the package of cigarettes on top of the deity that he was carving. You heard the story before? Prabhupada saw that. He sort of corrected him. But Prabhupada was so merciful, so, let's say, liberal, that he said, just smoke one less cigarette a day. It's not that Prabhupada didn't have him out, because these people were all that Prabhupada had to deal with at that time. But of course, that doesn't mean that we should do the same thing. And so anyway, that's how New Jagannath Puri got established. And the devotees were so enthusiastic that one time they took Lord Jagannath by himself to the park and just had to dance around him. There's a picture of that. And Prabhupada came out and he participated. He said, don't do that again. Lord Jagannath only comes out during Rath Yatra. They were dancing. They took to a hippie park where everyone was smoking marijuana. And they put him, it was Hippie Hill or something. Yeah, Hippie Hill was what it was called. And they put him on a little cloth or something, and everyone. There's actually a video of that. All the hippies just dancing around Lord Jagannath, and Lord Jagannath is just sitting there. Amazing. And then Prabhupada wanted Rath Yatras established all over the world. And that's what's happening now in ISKCON. So it's a very special festival. It's Prabhupada's festival. Prabhupada even conducted a Rath Yatra when he was 5 years old through the streets of Calcutta. He begged his father to get a cart. His father purchased a cart, fixed it up, and all the ladies would prepare boga. It was offered to Lord Jagannath, became prasad, and they would distribute it. So, anyway, Rath Yatra ki jai. Any questions or comments? Yes, Gopinath.
As far as I remember, I was in New York one time. I think the deities were in reverse order, like Jagannath first, then Subhadra.
Yeah, devotees oftentimes don't do it right. It should be Baladev first. Because there's other stories too where Balaram is protecting Subhadra when they're going back to Vrindavan. So it's important. Actually, philosophically, it's important to have Baladev first. Yeah, I don't know why they put Jagannath first.
Yeah, I was wondering if there's a reason why.
I have no idea, but it's not philosophically correct. Because Baladev has to go first to protect Subhadra, and then Subhadra's in the middle, and then Jagannath's the last. But anyway, it's all spiritual. But philosophically, it's not correct to do it that way. Any other questions? Oh yeah, another thing about Rath Yatra. The first time they did it in New York, guess who gave the devotees facility to construct the Rath Yatra cart? You know? Who? Donald Trump. Devotees didn't have a place to build the carts, so they went to Mr. Trump, his secretary, and eventually the word reached Donald Trump, and he gave permission. Pretty good, isn't it? And later on, he became president of the United States because he served Lord Jagannath. Just see, Yata Sukriti, right? It's amazing. Lord Jagannath is so kind like that. So any other questions or comments or problems or issues or complaints? Yes?
How long was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri?
It was 30-something years. I forget the exact amount of years. He spent, I know, not 30 years. I mean, it couldn't have been 30 years. I think it was 19 years. Sorry, I got it wrong. Because Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas when he was 24, and then he only stayed on the planet until he was 48. So it was less than 20 years. It was either 16 or 19 years now that I remember. Because he left, he was only 48 years on the planet before he left this world. Took sannyas at 24. I took sannyas at 29. And I'm already 70, so. What can you do? Old age. So, any other questions? Yeah,
Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he is in the mood of Radharani,
yeah.
but then when you put the peacock feather in him, then you worship him as Krishna, but then he is not so merciful as in the mood of Radharani. Because the Radharani is more merciful than Krishna.
Oh my God. Well, you have Lord Nityananda there. Lord Nityananda enables you to approach Radharani. By approaching Lord Nityananda, you become free from material desires. First of all, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sometimes displayed himself as Krishna too, so it's perfectly all right to put a peacock feather. I know that there's this controversy going on. There was a controversy. But Lord Chaitanya, when he first took sannyas, he actually sat on Srivas Thakur's altar. You understand? And he said, Srivas, look at, I am the person you've been worshipping this whole time. And so, he manifested himself, I wouldn't say often, but sometimes as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And sometimes as Radha Krishna combined, like when he was with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Sometimes he manifests himself in the Sadbhuja form. Right? And sometimes he manifests as Radha and Krishna intertwined. So it's different moods that Lord Chaitanya exhibited at different times. So, anyway, it's all right. We can put a peacock feather on Lord Chaitanya. It's not philosophically wrong.
Not all the time.
Whatever you like. Yeah, because we're worshiping him as God. It's fine. Wherever the Pujaris decide is fine with me.
But would it be better to worship him in the mood?
Well, if you're going to worship in the mood of Radharani, then put a sari on it. That's not appropriate. I mean, you worship Lord Chaitanya in certain mood. First of all, you're worshiping Lord Chaitanya as a householder. You don't worship the deity as Lord Chaitanya as a sannyasi. Because the devotees, they don't like to see Lord Chaitanya in a renounced way. They want to see him, enjoy it, They get very upset when they see him eating too little. Like if you're worshiping as a sannyasi, then you would just offer sannyas food like quinoa to him or something. Like my food, Which Prabhupada said, let the starvation commit. When Prabhupada was fed a similar diet to mine, he said, let the starvation committee go to hell. Devotees, one time they tried to, just boil vegetables, everything with Prabhupada, and Prabhupada got really upset. So we want to worship Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in opulence. When he was sannyasi, he didn't eat like that. Generally. I mean, there are exceptions. Like when he was eating the bags of Raghava, that's a different thing. Damayanti's prasada. But generally he just didn't eat that much. He exhibited the perfect mode of a sannyasi. And you would dress him differently. You would dress him in like a white dhoti without a sika. Certainly not with a crown. You don't dress sannyasis with crowns, do you? There was one devotee who dressed Prabhupada with a crown. This is in New Vrindavan. They actually, oh my God. This is when they did something really bogus. They had Prabhupada with like a whole cape, like a king's cape, a scepter, you know what a scepter, like a king's staff, and a crown. Oh my God. And they made a big statue of Prabhupada like 20 meters high outside. Man, you can't. You're not supposed to make statues outside because then the peacocks, not the peacocks, sorry, the pigeons, they pass stool on. And it was outside all winter long, you know. So that's a concoction. So we worship Prabhupada in his mood as a sannyasi. Of course, we don't worship the deity of Prabhupada. We don't depict him as a householder. We depict him in his preaching mood. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu we preach as a householder. And generally when he was there in Navadvip, he was acting, after he took initiation, he was acting as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The full-blown mood of separation from Krishna fully manifested after Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas. And that's one of the reasons Lord Chaitanya took sannyas. So it's just thinking about it's more appropriate to worship him as God. When I was a new devotee, I didn't understand that. And I had Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda deities, and I dressed them as sannyasis. And I gave them dandas. That shows, you really have to be educated to understand deity worship. It's called rasa bas. But it was fun. I made little tiny dandas for them, they had. But you don't worship Lord Chaitanya like that on the altar. So you worship him as God. And you find, all the residents in Navadvip worship Lord Chaitanya as God. Anyway, it's a little controversial point. Even in ISKCON, you've had people say, shouldn't go to peacock feather. But my feeling is Prabhupada wanted peacock feather. Another controversy is, does Advaitacharya have a beard? Or is he clean shaven? And there's two opinions about that. You understand? So Prabhupada one time said he should have a beard. And then sometimes other devotees complain he shouldn't have a beard because he looks like one of the members of the Deviant Vaishnava sect called the Vals. So anyway, whatever. So, you have a question?
Yeah, regarding Advaitacharya, didn't Prabhupada authorize the books with beard?
Beard, yeah. Prabhupada said beard. But then you find people outside of ISKCON saying, there was a whole study done when they were getting the deities, the Panchatattva deities for Srinath Mayapur. Remember that? Mm-hmm. Should he have a beard? Should he not have a beard? But Prabhupada instructed, let him have a beard. Of course, devotees should not have beards. Prabhupada did not want that. Even during Chaturmas, Prabhupada called it Chaturmas, if they grew a beard. Prabhupada said his followers should be clean shaven. And, the brahmacharis at least, they should at least shave every fortnight, every 2 weeks. And nowadays it's actually in fashion to have a bald head. When I was young, joined the movement, it was in fashion to have long hair. So when the devotees went on Sankirtan, they would put these wigs, long-haired wigs on. They went out to the shoulders. But now, actually, you see so many respectable businessmen, isn't it, with bald heads? No problem. Prabhupada called hairs hippie seeds. Because people want to look handsome. Yeah. Anyway, so any other questions or comments? Okay, I think it's time. Thank you very much. It's been a nice visit. All glory is to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada, Ki Jai.
His Holiness Krsna Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai.